Hello and welcome everyone to our panel discussion. This will touch on a very important topic of establishing a European infrastructure for quantum technologies. So the panel will be a discussion that involves a number of relevant panelists that I will introduce. They will briefly introduce themselves, but also you have heard already from some of them. And we will have some questions. And then we will also take questions from the audience, from all of you. So I propose to begin maybe in order. And maybe if you can just briefly introduce yourself and say a statement about your opinions on the process of establishing a European infrastructure for quantum technologies.
So I'm Paul Indelicato. First, I have to give you the apologies of the General Direction for Research and Innovation, the Ministry of Research in France, that I could not come. But since I was involved with this flagship when I was at the ministry myself, they asked me to come to replace them. So that's also happened that I am a physicist, and so I know a little bit of those issues. Of course, this infrastructure, as it was discussed today, is very important to develop if we want to be competitive in the field of quantum technologies in general, and of course the communications and the quantum computing are very important issues that are taking a lot of strength everywhere. So France is now working on a plan to contribute from this, and it's between the Ministry of Research and the Ministry of Industry. There was a report at the National Assembly, the Office for Choices in the Technology and Research, which explain how important it is to get involved in this, but there is not yet the final plan, and it's not public yet, so I cannot really comment so much on this, but it should be available in the next few weeks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Michael Wiesmüller. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be a member of this distinguished panel. I'm heading the Department for Key Enabling Technologies in Austria, in the Ministry of Technology and Innovation. If you want, so I consider myself being, quite responsible for the high-tech industry in Austria, as I would put it. I have quite a long history with respect to quantum technology, since, as it happens, Austria has some very strong groups here. And I do remember a project called SecureQC. I don't know if this word still means something here to the community. It was one of the first really large so-called integrated projects 15 or 16 years ago, I don't know, where the first time we thought, well, we have to bring the quantum topic out of the ivory towers of research and make really an application project. And this project was coordinated by Austrian groups, and it made quite it had quite an impact on the Austrian community as well. Just, some introductory remarks. I do think the topic, both quantum technology as such or quantum infrastructure, is of strategic importance for Europe. I do think we should talk more about topics like sovereignty, autonomy in Europe. I'm convinced that it is very important to have a very strong footprint on European developments in this domain. We very much welcome that the European Commission was, in this sense, visionary, far ahead from a lot of member states. The whole initiative was very much driven by you, in general terms, I could say that Austria will be a strong partner both in the flagship environment and in the infrastructure area. One of the lead projects, which the name is OpenQKD, some of you might know it, is coordinated by an Austrian research organization, the Austrian VTT, the AET. Yeah, that's for the beginning.
Oh. So, good afternoon. I am Kelly Ruana. I'm the Deputy Director General in DG Connect. And I think I've hoped with the speech I made before, I drew what we see as important areas to invest in Europe. Now, I'm glad to be here on this panel, and the colleagues here, Michael, but all the colleagues around, and Herbert are, I would say, colleagues who have been working together with us in making sure that Europe does not miss important opportunities as the quantum opportunity. And the infrastructure issue is extremely important. And as you've seen, what we have proposed for the next financial framework, there is a large part on capacity building, on infrastructure building, on ensuring also that these capacities and infrastructure are used all across Europe with all industries, all sectors, and in support of SMEs and the growth of new businesses as well. So just to wrap up what I said before, and not repeat, we think a combination of instruments and the work together with the member states and with the stakeholders, with the combination of what we do on research and development, on innovation, on investments and capacities, but also on the diffusion, can give us will be a great opportunity for Europe to lead in quantum in the future. So I'll stop there for the time being. I spoke enough before, so thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Miloš Kotarec. Good afternoon. I am newly appointed Technology Innovation Envoy for Nordic countries with the seat in Helsinki. I'm former advisor of the Deputy Prime Minister and Director General of the Digital Agenda Division. And as for the comment, I would maybe say that small countries like Slovakia or small European countries can actually keep in step with all these new technologies only within the European Union initiatives. And as we are a member of Euro HPC, we would certainly like to contribute also to the European Quantum Flagship. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, well, I should start by, according to the schedule, Freke Heijman would be here, representing the Dutch government, but she's delayed, so we're only tonight. So you have to do it with me, unfortunately. My name is Roger Verberg, representing TNO, the Dutch National Research and Technology Organization. I'm the director for the semiconductor activities, so I spend most of my time in the real semiconductor industry, so knowing how these companies look at our technology field. I was involved in the initialization of QTech, the joint venture of TNO and the University of Delft. And I have my roles in the national agenda of quantum technologies in the Netherlands, as well as the innovation working group on the flagship. And I would like to talk mostly about the transition from this ramp-up phase of the flagship, what we all really are grateful for, to the next phase where you have focus on maybe centers of expertise or digital innovation hubs or whatever name we use. But I believe in this kind of focus points to push this technology further and make the bridge to industry.
Thank you.
Well, I continue to be Antti Vasara from VTT. But as you heard the presentation of the three presentations covering the Finnish ecosystem, what I want to emphasize here in this panel is then the fact that we don't want to be building 27 or 28 different ecosystems in Europe, but we need to be combining these different strengths together so then that we have one European ecosystem, and then we have a really good fighting chance to make a big difference in the world. And I hope you share that vision. But thanks, and great to be in the panel.
Thank you so much. My name is Herbert Seisel. I'm from the Federal Ministry of Education and Research in Germany, and I work there in this field of digital transformation. And research for that, this includes from software via artificial intelligence, via microelectronics like autonomous systems, IT security, of course, and of course quantum technologies, and of course also photonics. I think if you look to this area, quantum technologies, we have a huge future ahead of us. And the most important thing for me is to get industry involved in this area. And we have different, let's say, quantum technology sub-areas like quantum sensing, quantum computing, quantum communication. And we have very different mature stages of these areas. And I think we have to build the right framework for each of these areas that we can, on the one hand side, increase the potential we have on the academic side, but also of this other side that we involve industry, and we have good opportunities for that because there are already low-hanging fruits we can go for. But one thing is very important. First, if you look to the competitive situation in the world, I think Europe has stayed together. And we have a lot of countries with very good excellence, academia, and also industry. And if we join forces here, I think we still have a chance to beat the battle in the world. I'm sure that this is the case. And that's why, for me, the flagship is such an important point. First of all, it builds up a European ecosystem. And this ecosystem is most important for our future. And secondly, this gives us the opportunity to bring companies, industry within this community. And the basic for all of these is, on the one hand side, of course, the academic excellence. On the other side, of course, the infrastructure, and that's why we are here for.
Yes, thank you very much. So I would like to begin with some general questions. So any of you can volunteer to respond to this question. The first one has to do with common infrastructures, and recently the Declaration on Quantum Communication Infrastructure was signed. What is the goal of this initiative?
Yeah,
well,
yeah. Well, I mean, I will start, and please,
yes.
The colleagues can come in. The objective is to really deploy a quantum communication infrastructure based on a secured quantum key distribution systems. With a part that will be satellite-based, a special part, and a terrestrial part. With the goal of securing key, starting with key public assets in the Union. So an infrastructure will be starting for the public sector with the ambition to open it also to the private sector as we move. That's the overall goal of this initiative. And that would help us prepare for what we call post-quantum cryptography and have completely shielded assets in Europe, completely shielded government data sets, databases, completely shielded communications between public sector to start with, but with the ambition that this would be open also to the private sector in the future. That's the overall goal. And we're very happy that we have 10 member states already joining in. I mean, most of the colleagues around here are in. We hope that others would come in after. As we've done for EuroHPC, you know, EuroHPC was started with 7 pioneers, and then now we have almost everyone. I don't know, depending on today, we could say everyone or not, just depending on the Brexit. Almost everyone. So we showed what we could do when we're in your HPC, what we can do when we pull our act together. We could deploy in less than 1 year. I mean, it's really a record time by Brussels time. A record time 1 year to get an initiative up and running with all member states co-governed, organization and co-governed with co-investment. We've been able to put 800 million euro on the table to acquire the world's top supercomputers. And also, which is even more important also, or even as important, is the upgrade of the supercomputing facilities in member states who wish to do so. We have five of them. And with co-investment done by 18 member states in this 800 million euros. And the next is to come, in addition to support research innovation to build up the whole ecosystem around supercomputing. Equally important, if not more. So, and that's one initiative that what we do in EuroHPC. We're able to do the same thing for quantum communication infrastructure, with this time the objective of deployment of the technology, really. And it's technology in Europe. I think Austria is well positioned, as Michael, when it comes to quantum key distribution, but it's, technology comes from all over Europe, as Herbert said, and when we bring it together, we integrate it in one infrastructure, a big achievement.
Thank you. And maybe a closely connected question, because if we think about future visions like the quantum internet, and if you think about large quantum communication infrastructures, a related question is, what do you think are the biggest differences in setting an infrastructure for quantum technologies compared to classical technologies?
Yeah, I think the most important difference is that most people don't understand what quantum is. I think this is very different to other technologies. For example, if you go to transistors, this is something people get in school. They get trained, they get learned. But there is just a few numbers of people understanding what is quantum. And I think that's why if we go to quantum, we have already to start in school to train people in a different way. That's a real difference to other technologies. But let me come back also to the question you raised to Khalil about the quantum communication platform. I think this has many dimensions. One dimension was not mentioned yet, and this is a very important one. The constituency involved in this is not just academia, industry, it's also the security
agencies,
people and institutions. That means we have a much higher visibility for this issue in the parliamentarian and in the public area, which is very good for quantum, I think, and we should use that. And I think this helps us also to transport the future possibilities and the huge potential this technology has.
I would like to add one dimension, because it's not just a quantum infrastructure. I mean, that's what we talk about, because that's what we have to learn. But it is not that the conventional network isn't there. We also have to work towards a hybrid system. And that's an even more of a challenge, because we have people who understand quantum, but they normally do not know all that it takes to have the current operators and the communication networks in place, both on Earth and via satellites. And bringing these two together, I think that's the only way to implement it. And that's quite a challenge.
So it's also a question of finding a common language very often between people.
But this is not a difference to other technologies we have. We have normally the problem that on the one hand side we have the academic people having their own environment, thinking in their own language, and then they have to get trained to learn to think like an engineer, to get this out in the industry. And this is the same with quantum, of course, and this is a little bit what you're addressing here. But this is not a difference to other technologies we know. The real difference is that the most people don't understand what quantum is.
Yes.
Just to jump in, because I like very much what Herbert said with respect to the security. I do think, because we all say that we all find that we have a kind of communication issue here, since this is such an this is such an obscure science, or it's obscure in the sense that 99.9% of Austrians wouldn't understand what it's about. What I wanted to say is, talk about security as a public good for Europe. Talk about that this will be, even in an even more digitized world, this would be substantial for the quality of our life, the quality of our services, that we can guarantee that we have an autonomous European solution in various aspects. So this might be a very strong, very strong narrative with respect to big investments to come. Another issue which I just wanted to throw in is, I think infrastructures in this respect, and this technology could help to develop what, well, all the sessions before were about, to develop an industry. Infrastructures might be, so to say, the first framework where we can really have large-scale proof-of-concept projects, where you can incubate, for example, equipment components for various types. You can have public procurements on specific topics, and this is new.
Yes.
I mean, this is different to other technology. Sensors on streets for automated driving, you already have everything. You have the whole industry already on board. In this case, we have, well, this is the big challenge that we don't have an industry.
This is a challenge, but also an opportunity, I would say.
I think I can build on this, is that we have to do three things at the same time. You have to still do fundamental research, because not everything is available yet. You have to do technological development, and then deploy the infrastructure. And I think in the field of quantum metrology, we have seen something like that, when we want to have high accuracy time distributed all over the places we need it. You have to develop at the same time better atomic clocks. You have to develop the system to use fiber optics and amplify the signal in the right way to distribute it all over long distances, and then interconnect France and Germany and in the future Italy. So you have exactly the same thing, but even more difficult. So that's a real challenge, but it's also very fundamental to work on this.
Thank you. I would like to now ask some individual questions to each of the panelists to have an overall perspective. And of course, we begin with the European Commission. This is something that we have touched already during the talks, but it's a question that everyone has in mind. Have we lost the race against the US and China?
Oh. Yeah, well, in quantum, you mean?
Of course.
The race has not started yet. I mean, you can lose before you start. I think the opportunities are ahead of us, and I think Europe is well positioned. When sometimes we read the press, we have the impression that Europe is completely dead, that our economy is stagnating, that we're not anywhere in technology. It's not as bad as we might think. Of course, we could do much better. That's clear. And it's in digital in general, we have areas where we're leading, and we have areas where we need to do better. In quantum, it's starting. We have very good assets. I think we would lose if we wait too long to move in deploying.
Yes.
We would lose if we say, okay, we don't need to do research anymore, now we go just only for application. I think we would lose as well. And this debate, should you do research or you should do both. There's no other way.
We have to find the proper balance.
We have to do both, there's no other way. And I think we have the means to do both. Europe as a whole has the means to do both, deploy, because we can integrate and bring together different knowledge and skills and industrial capacity that we have across Europe. Industries that have managed to build up supply chains across Europe are doing well well worldwide and European. And the same thing when it comes to new technologies, build up the skills, bring them together, and we can win the race. I think we should not, how to say, be blinded by, media. We're not good in Europe in selling ourselves very well, but we should do better in that perspective as well. So, deploy technology, continue the research and development, reinforce our excellence, build our skills, but at the same time, make sure that what we do is visible worldwide. And it's important today. It's important today as competition on technology dominance is fierce worldwide. And I think for Europe to show that we are, we have the technology and we're able to exploit it in our businesses, in our society is very important.
Thank you. We continue with Austria. Sorry, yes.
Allow me to add something. I think we have to be very careful in balancing things out. And I know, of course, that a lot of media articles and information comes about, for example, quantum computing. What is Google doing? What is others doing? We have to be very careful going in the same direction in presenting things, because there might be a danger that we promise too much to our industry. And this will not help us at the end. So we have to promise what we can really get, we can really come to. And of course, there we have to be more offensive. I agree with you, Khalil, on that. But we should not override that. I think this is very, very important. And not everything what's in the press today is, I would recommend to our industry to follow.
Yes, Antti wanted to.
Yeah. I have to comment on this one, because all these questions always, has Europe lost the race in X against US and China? It kind of like then that it's bugging me, because I think that we don't really understand always then that how Europe works and how US and China works. In China, the state decides, and then they go like that. In US, it's the company, so Google decides to do quantum, they don't have to care what anybody else thinks, they just go and do it. In Europe, we need the buy-in. We have a different way of operating on the European scene, so we need to have the credibility in the eyes of the big public, and in that sense earn the justification what we do. So we need to show progress, and that's why, for example, the quantum communication infrastructure is a really valuable thing, because we can go and show something tangible already now that has a benefit, winning that credibility. But then at the same time, I think that we have a huge competitive advantage that if we make something work in Europe, because the world works like that, we are much more like the real world, because then that there is so much diversity all over the globe that if we can get this thing working in the European scene, it's much easier for us to go elsewhere, because that's the thing that Chinese companies many times discover, that the state hasn't been declaring them winners elsewhere, or then that the US companies notice then that there are completely different market dynamics. So we have a lot going on for us if we play our strengths.
Thank you, yes. Yes, so we continue with a different question and Austrian perspective on what I think is also very important. So what do you think it is necessary in order to get more private investors to quantum technologies?
Well, okay, another billion-dollar question. Well, let me put it this way. Following a little bit my observations of the community, having seen presentations like those incredible, interesting startup that we have seen here right now, one of the crew issues for the next phase will be what we can call a kind of stronger industrialized ecosystem around those strong groups. I think this is a development which is quite recent. that all those institutes, professors, research groups really start to talk with engineers, talk with people who are producing equipment, who are understanding systems, who have a perspective of an application, of an industry, something like this. If I look back 10 years ago, this was a very, well, there were some very small groups who tried to do this, but it was by far no mainstream. So the first thing I would say in order to bring a stronger industrial perspective is this grassrooting. You need a different constituency to go really in the direction of proof of concept, of engineering applications or so. We have startup companies in Austria too. One was on your slide, on the slide of the startup. And I do expect in the next 5 to 10 years that we will see more of them who are highly specialized in a specific, have a specific product and a small market where they can live on. With respect to the larger industry, I do think we need still a far more developed articulation. VTT has shown us what the potential in the area of microelectronics, for example. And I really do think that we should deepen the understanding of, well, I would say the trajectories of the European companies and what is happening in the area of quantum. This is, and I would fully agree with Herbert on this. This is a long-term issue. We shouldn't promise people 5 years or so, but I mean, start to really build on those. Well, we have a strong quantum community. We have some of really leading electronic companies, and we should try to bring them stronger together to make them more. I had a lot of discussions with Austrian companies on those topics. And they say, well, it's interesting, yeah, but far from putting this somewhere on the development agenda. Mm-hmm. And the third, what I wanted to mention, it was mentioned already too, we need a story behind quantum. We need a story for industry. I mean, I can go in any Austrian high-tech company and talk with the whole management about artificial intelligence or Internet of Things or I don't know, smart sensor work over hours. My discussion with on quantum would be 2 minutes or 3 minutes. So, and this has to change.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we continue with France. Based on the French Academy of Science, an international system of units was built. What do you think are the most important next steps on the track for quantum technology regarding infrastructure and specifically, in this case, standardization?
Well, I think it's a very strong issue because if you want to be able to communicate between different countries, you have to find somehow a common language, and if there is no normalization, then it's not going to work. If you can have a perfect system, each country has a very nice one, and they don't talk to each other. And in a global world, we need to be able to exchange with all our all the countries within Europe. So I think involving the Institute for Metrology and for normalization is a key issue to be able to have a good quantum networking system all over Europe. And probably also you have to do that for all the other pillars we were discussing so that you can have the same program running on different quantum computers from different companies. And you have and that has to be done also in parallel with all the developments we are talking about. So that's why it's a very quantum problem, actually. You have to be able to have a multiple things done at the same time and without knowing at the beginning what will work. And for example, quantum computers, there is not yet a clear path to what would be the most efficient system, but still you have to develop in parallel the norms and the software and the fundamental science beyond. So.
Yes, and I think, yes.
I think this is also a very good advantage for Europe because every country has very strong meteorological institutes, and they are already have a good interconnection. So they are working on standards, on common views and things like that. And this is a really advantage we have, and we should really encourage them to even do more in that direction, because this gives us the right basis for the industry to go in that direction, because then the standards are there, then they have the right partners for example, for quantum sensing. So I think this is a very advantage for Europe here.
Yes. Now, for Slovakia,
Okay.
infrastructures are much more than buildings and technologies. They are also about people. How do we attract young talent to quantum technologies, and what role does European cooperation play in this?
Thank you very much. I don't think maybe Slovak representative should be the one who tried to explain how to attract young people or younger generation of scientists or generally students to quantum technology, because a very interesting example was mentioned here by few speakers, that including you, I think, that there is even bachelor studies at Aalto University in quantum technology, which is offering them educational infrastructure. This is one way. For Slovakia, I can just mention that QTSK established a new platform which is called EduQTSK, which is building new curriculum for universities, where at the moment, which at the moment is being tested by two of them, and is planned in near future to be implemented in all relevant universities. And at the same time, they are creating a new international school for quantum compute, where there will be 6 times a year, 1 week international teachers school available for all those who are interested, and maybe available for being able to take this education. But I would maybe also add that there is more necessary to be done in general information, which was already discussed here in the public. It shouldn't be a topic where people get scared when somebody starts talking about quantum. On the other hand, there should be more informed, very attractive way what actually quantum technology is. And I think what the European Commission is doing at the moment is also a step forward, where promotion of the technology, of the quantum technology, is starting from the very attractive level of telling people examples from another part of, or general part of their lives, what actually quantum technology is. They could go even to the lower level, as was mentioned here, to the maybe basic education, to ground schools, where children start to get touch with the topic at the very early stage.
Thank you. Yes. Then we continue with the Netherlands.
Sure.
If you talk about quantum technologies in the Netherlands, of course, we always think about Delft. This is the most important national centers. In September, your national agenda on quantum technology was published. And can you tell us, can you share with us, what are the plans for the development of infrastructures in the Netherlands?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning Delft, but that's, let's say, the oldest institute dedicated to this second quantum revolution, and the biggest one, but certainly not the only one. In Amsterdam, Leiden, Eindhoven, we have complementary centers. And I think the first idea to work on this national agenda is to figure out how these all could work together. I mean, if you all say, I work on quantum computing, it feels like competition. It's also a bit how people at academia are trained to look at competition. But if you dive a bit deeper, they do complementary activities. If you say software, it can be the embedded software, it can be algorithms, it can be applications, etc. So that's what we'd like, that we wanted to describe in this national agenda, how it works together, how it is complementary. And together we have, as, let's say, the Dutch ecosystem, a way better proposition than just Delft or Amsterdam or any of the other ones. And in the national agenda we also indeed describe well, all different aspects that are needed, so education, but also ethics and legal, and also infrastructure, because it's an excellent, let's say, test bed to find the white spots. What are we still missing? Normally you only notice what you miss if you really start implementing or engineering what you would like to see. The scientists have an idea of how it will look like. When you start engineering, you figure out all kinds of issues that are not ready yet, questions back for the fundamental science even. And these test infrastructures are an important step to do so. And the other thing is that we really push for platforms that can be accessible to all. Like we also have the debates on the Industry 4.0, as also there we have in the debate how to counter-fight the winner-takes-it-all platforms from the US. If you would like to exchange data, that can be done by Microsoft Azure or Amazon, but that's a winner-takes-it-all platform. And I think in Europe, especially also with Germany and a few other countries, we work on alternatives on this. And something similar, to my opinion, has to be done for quantum. We need quantum platforms that can be accessible by all players of Europe, at least, without creating a winner-takes-all platform, because that's
and of course
not
this
the European
requires
way.
Coordination through all the European countries, yes.
Yeah, I think that's why, I mean, the infrastructure, I totally agree, and that's the European approach, totally, and that's our wealth. Frankly, this is our key strength. Our key strength of bringing, and we should continue to try to bring the latest technology to all in Europe, all businesses, wherever they are. And that we can do. I think in terms of infrastructure, you know, we have the communication infrastructure. We talked about what we can do in quantum communication infrastructure to start with, but this can grow in the future. But there's the quantum computing infrastructure that I think we need there as well, an important effort, and I mentioned what we can do together as well in this. And we need an infrastructure also to bring latest technologies to everyone. I would say infrastructure for testing, for experimentation. That goes from quantum chips and quantum components to old quantum sensors to access to latest quantum communication. And that means an infrastructure of skills, of resources, as well as equipment. And that there as well, I think what we're proposing for the Digital Europe program and for Horizon Europe would enable us also to reinforce that infrastructure. We should be spread all across, like we're doing in high-performance computing, like we've done in micro nano electronics and Excel, what we're doing in the digitization of industry, digital innovation hubs. I think that's a model, frankly, that could make all of Europe take an upgrade of the innovation capacity. And in quantum, that could work. But that would mean we need to rely on all of you.
Yes. Okay, we continue with a question for Finland. We have heard already about IQM, which raised more than 11 million. But what are the plans for building a national and European infrastructures beyond startup and private companies? What is Finland's opinion on this?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say that kind of like that getting an 11 million seed round in Finland is amazingly big for a startup. So I think that it shows that how much faith there is in IQM. But overall, for both the national and European infrastructure in Finland, and like we described, Otanano and Micronova inside there is kind of like the biggest piece in that puzzle. And obviously, we want to be building on that and kind of like that how we can utilize then the sort of the research fab-like operation that we have, plus then a lot of research capabilities around that one. So in the phase that where still we are developing for the first time many of the things, having that flexibility ought to be a very valuable part of the European infrastructure. Secondly, I think that kind of like when looking at then the next framework, multi-annual framework program in EU, then it's important then that we show the support to Digital Europe, but it's also important then the other instruments like EIC also support then quantum in very visible ways. So then that early on also provide then funding for companies like IQM, which I'm sure that are also in other countries in Europe. And then this that how do we promote researcher exchange inside Europe? So building up the networks inside Europe will be one of the core strengths that we can have, and that will require, of course, things like Quantum Flagship or these types of events, but also then that how do we really kind of like make sure that people circulate inside Europe, so then that we have really tight network of researchers who know each other.
Yes. And now we go to Germany. Germany has a strong tradition, of course, in research, and there are many research institutions and organizations that are very active in the field and in quantum technologies specifically, including Max Planck, Helmholtz, and many more. All in all, Germany has a broadly distributed excellence in the field. We can really say that. How do you coordinate between different activities of different institutions in Germany?
I think we have different levels of coordination, of course. If you look for quantum itself, I think we have a so-called Programmausschuss, which is an advisory board between academic partners and also industrial partners. And we are discussing with the people in the advisory board in which direction we develop our programs. But quantum technology is not just standing alone. Michael already mentioned the question of technology sovereignty. We have the question of cyber security. We have the question of supercomputer of the future. These things are all interconnected. And that's why we have another level of advisory people giving us advice how we could connect these different issues together. But even at the lowest level, for example, if you look for Helmholtz, Helmholtz has also for itself program committees acting in that direction. What is the Helmholtz mission? What Helmholtz should provide in this area? They have a special quantum program, as well as Max Planck, of course, but this is not central organized, it's more decentralized. And also Fraunhofer, for example, if you look at the newest development with Fraunhofer and the IBM computing, which is for all partners in Europe.
Yes, thank you. So now we go to one more general questions, and then I would like to open the discussion to the public. So we have been discussing briefly about the quantum communication infrastructure. Actually, not briefly. I think we touched over the quantum communication infrastructures quite extensively. But is there anything similar planned for the other pillars of quantum technologies? And if so, what are these different, how are these different initiatives coordinated and crossing and overlapping in some cases? For example, quantum computation or quantum communication infrastructures can feed into quantum computation.
Indeed, I mean, as I mentioned, I think I preempted a bit your question. I think of quantum computing, we need, to take what's come out already from the flagship and the roadmap of the flagship and implement it. And with the ambition of having a quantum computer or a series of quantum computers functioning in Europe, operating in the 5 years to come. So that's building a quantum computing infrastructure that is available, and an ecosystem around it would be essential. It has to accompany what we're doing in quantum communication. And that, I think, is part of what we're planning on the continuation of Euro HPC, because that's next generation high performance computing that we need to discuss with the member states. part of it to be supported under the Digital Europe program, as well as the Research Innovation Horizon Europe. Now that's around quantum computing as one. And I think the flagship has enabled us to move, a step forward on this, and we need to continue, scale it up. That's what we want. And the other, as I mentioned, we need an infrastructure for the diffusion of technology. And for areas like sensing, quantum simulators, given the breadth of the applications, I think having the technology, access to the technology all across Europe for all industries would be essential to make sure that, as soon as we have something that is mature enough that it is applied across Europe. That could be through, hubs of innovation, using what we have as infrastructure for digital innovation hubs, or new ways of bringing quantum to all industries. That would be a third type of infrastructure. But these, I think, if there are other ideas from the stakeholders from the EU side, I think we're ready to see how we're open to see how we can implement.
I think this huge infrastructure we're talking about, Euro-HPC and the quantum communication, this is more a little bit in the direction of mission-driven research, where we have also the need of potential growing research, if I may say it in that way. And I see the flagship right in that direction, building up the ecosystem, getting the right new ideas in this area, having a flexibility in the research, also in the connection to industry. Where we have in this big infrastructure parts, we have to solve infrastructure questions. There we have to be much more focused. And so both systems have their need and their input. And for me, the flagship is ecosystem building and potential growing.
Yeah, I think, and I'm sorry, because I want to say it, and I don't want to miss that one, because I think in addition we need to reinforce our research infrastructure, and I'm thinking about, what could be latest equipment and resources you need for research itself, thinking about medium to long term. And there, I think the flagship as well can play a very important role. I don't think we have, from the EU side, so far looked at this, practically or concretely. But that, I think, research infrastructure for quantum is something that will be very important. So far, it was member states' initiative to a large extent, supporting the institutional research. But I mean, if there could be also there room for a collective effort.
I see. Maybe a first example, small scale, is the Quantum Inspire platform by QTech, where they engineered the whole stack from the hardware to the cloud accessibility. It could be a platform to access both the quantum hardware as well as high-performance computing. But indeed, that's on national level. It could be a stepping stone to European level quantum computing infrastructure. And I think it's worth looking into this. Yeah.
Yes. I would certainly support that, because basically the idea of becoming a member of flagship came from the research community. And because they are well connected, they actually exist because they are connected. Then they came to the government, listen, this is up-to-date technology. We have to do something about it, because the European Union wants to move this direction. So the government, after a short analysis, decided to really become part of this endeavor. And I think supporting throughout the building this infrastructure research community would be really of necessity.
Importance.
And
also
importance,
from small countries is also
especially for yes,
exactly,
yes, I'm talking for small countries
yes,
mostly.
Indeed,
yes.
Very well. I think we are now ready to take questions from the public. So, who is the first? There.
First of all, I would like to thank all the panel members for joining to this event. My name is Mikael Laksa. I represent Vihdin Työttömät ry and Axiom. This concert, what is this, Pasilinna Conference Center has been built about 100 years ago with workers' union. And for them, I would like to ask that how quantum technology is affecting financial technology. Because when we can simulate different futures, governments are known to, and corporations and banks are known to capitalize the information about the future. So how can we give all the citizens, clients of corporations and governments the proper lexicon of how to deal with quantum age? And that is the essence of my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to answer the connection between quantum and finance?
Well, I agree that it is, I don't have the answer, but I agree it affects the people as the institutions, for example, banks, could have a means that they don't have yet, so they have better control, maybe over the information flow. And the audience, the general audience, has to be informed about this and what the aspects are. And I think that's addressed in our agendas. So these ethical and legal aspects have to be investigated a bit more. It's still a bit difficult on what timescale it will really be implemented. But you know that this education takes a bit of time. So it is about time to start this debate. Yeah, and especially outside this crowd here.
Definitely, yes, please.
I think the question is a very good one, but it's not just related to quantum. If you talk about artificial intelligence, if you talk about digitization, if you talk about quantum, we have all the same problem on that. How to get these changes ahead of us into the heads of the people, and how can we be making these developments in a way that they follow our ethical and cultural issues, and the people have access to it and can use it, have a use to it. And what we are trying right now, all of us, we are here for governments, to trying to find a third way between the two pillars in the world we have right now, the more state-driven AI, digitization, quantum we have in China, and on the other side, this from the large companies. And what we feel and what we see is that we get a huge support all over the world of the other countries. Because every country, if you go to China, if you go to Korea, if you go to Singapore, if you go to Canada, if you go to Africa, all these countries face the same problem. How we can assure that we have a technology development follows our cultural heritage and ethical rules. And I think if we join together on that, we have a market force and we have also force to fulfill that. But this is a very long-lasting and long-running project. But I tell you, since we started 2 years ago, we started this with artificial intelligence. Today, I have problems to find the right dates to serve all the requests I have from all countries all over the world. So there is a huge movement going on right now in that direction. They are not all sharing the same, but they fear all that on the one hand side, we drift in a direction of state-driven, or in a country, in a industry-owned world, and they fear that, and that's why they try to find alliances to find a new way. I don't know how the way will be, but we have some parts already. The Commission had this data issue, and even Japan now joined it. So I think we have possibilities to go forward, and that's the same with quantum. I think this is a general development we face. I'm sorry that I was a little bit now.
No, it's you're at the heart of it. I think it's a very good question. How to make sure digital transformation follows our the key of what we got in terms of fundamental rights, in terms of ethical and legal framework that we have built. And Herbert is right. In Europe, we have built something unique, and in terms of respect of human dignity, in terms of respect of democracy, in terms of respect of fundamental rights. And it's, we have translated this into our rule of law, into our legal framework. We have translated this, and we are keen to make sure that we adapt our legal framework to technology development, and this is the big challenge today. I think quantum will bring in a new challenge, because you'll be able to process data even, thousands or millions of times faster than what we do today. One of the big problems that we're facing with artificial intelligence and the processing of data and use of more and more of algorithms is transparency. So, are these algorithms doing things that we don't know about? And how to make sure that we have a human oversight on them. Are they biased? Are they discriminating? Are they using bias? Are they adding safety risks that we cannot control? Quantum will have an impact on that as well. It would accelerate that and will amplify it. That's why it's very important that now we set the right framework to make sure that this technology is developed. All digital technologies, the most prominent today is around artificial intelligence and data, that make sure that this is developed in a way that safeguards what we have agreed, that this is a way of life in Europe. For AI, we have worked since now 2 years almost, together with the member state, but together with a high-level expert group coming from civil society, coming from unions, coming from industry, coming from academia, from philosophers to lawyers, to technologists, to see what could be the guidelines that we could use and follow for the development of artificial intelligence. We have a very good report. It's, I think, a very thorough report that came out that we are now trying to see how we translate into law. And the new commission, the new president-elect said that in the next 100 days, so 3 months after the new commission, so from December on, we will put on the table what could be a first legal framework around artificial intelligence and its development. And we're looking at aspects as traceability, as transparency, as accountability, to make sure that our fundamental rights are safeguarded. And there are threats. There are threats, so we need to go. Your question was on the financial sector, and this is one of the biggest areas where we have transparency issues. It has positive impact and have negative impact. It could have negative impact. It could have positive impact because I think with quantum we'll be able to simulate better. I hope so. What could happen and avoid crisis and not be in a hazardous way, when it comes to our financial systems. I don't think it's acceptable anymore. The technology should enable us to, predict risk and make sure that we have all the means to respond to that. That, I think, is some of the positive side. But it could have negative if it introduces additional opacity in the system and discrimination and biases. That's why we need a legal framework for that. That's what we're all working on.
Just one, because I do think it's a very important question. I just wanted to say, there is no place on earth as Europe. Europe is the only country who was able really to force global monopolies to follow our rules. Let's not forget this. Why should this be different in a quantum world? Why should this be different? Yep. Second, what I wanted to mention is more a reminder on politicians. I think we have to look a little bit more into history of technology, because the ways how technology are adapted by societies has and a tremendous variety of very intelligent steps. Where, well, let's see, but this technology has some elements which are good for us, others which are bad, and in the next step you get into the next generation of benefits that you get. And there are even a lot of, there are a lot of European examples too where we got rid of technology. Think of Concorde, for example, what an incredible engineering effort it was, and how, well, it was really a masterpiece of engineering. And after 20 years, we found out, 25 years, I don't know, we found out now, this is a technology we don't need. So I just wanted to bring this perspective that humankind or societies is a strong force with respect to the fate of a technology, and this might happen in quantum too. Yeah.
Yes.
There is another point also, is that of course we cannot expect the general public to understand all the details of research in general and quantum physics in general, but there is also a movement worldwide for open science, which is quite important. I was in Berlin just 2 days ago for Open Access 2020 meeting, and where people are working so that all publications in research would be available, at least funded from public money, will be available to everybody, and then you have to have programs so that people don't think it's hidden from them, and because that's, I guess, a real issue too. So I think open science is important for that.
So the first question gave rise to a very huge answer and great debate. I think very interesting debate. Yes, we have one more point of view.
Just a nice story on that. You probably know that we have a quantum program in Germany. We created last year with 650 million euros. And one of the issues we have there is the finance market and the question how we control it. So we thought, yes, let's take 10 million and try to develop something in this area. We talked to the control institutions there, and they say to us, yes, that's very important. We don't know how to control it in the future. How many 100 millions you need? That was a very interesting experience I did. So that means the control instances we have in Europe, they have a huge amount of money, they have a huge interest to understand how these things are working, and they will provide us with the necessary money to doing research on that as well. This is a very interesting experience I did.
Okay, so maybe we will continue with a second question from the public, and then we start wrapping up, I think, because we are almost ready for the closing remarks, but we still have time for one more question, or maybe two. Yes?
There's one there.
Over there. I think there's a question over there.
Just a quick question. If suppose tomorrow morning you would have a breakthrough in understanding the entanglement, and there will be a paper on the archive, and people who know what happens, they would understand that this starts a new race in building a new quantum computer. Will Europe have the resources to actually go ahead, China and the United States, to to build one before they do?
Do we have the means? Yes. I think Europe has the means. Do we have the structures to deploy these means? We're building them up. I think the flagship is a very good step forward. And we're building up, as I mentioned, the framework that enables us to act quickly as well, very quickly, to acquire these what would be entanglement-based new computing systems. Yeah, we would be able to do that. I must say something that, yeah, we will be, if we maintain what we're doing in the flagship, what we start to do in EuroHPC, because these are the structures that enable us to further the research and development, to also acquire equipment. we'll be able to do it together, so we can act quickly. That yes, we can. And I must say that, you know, member states also, depending on the size, we have member states who can act very quickly, and they've been acting quickly. We shouldn't forget that as well.
Come to me, we make a speedboat.
Okay, I think that it's probably the time to thank all the panelists for these very interesting discussions. Thank the public. I think that we touched many important topics today, both for the future of infrastructures, but also for the future of quantum technologies in Europe in the broadest sense. And I think that I can now probably give again the word to Tommaso for the closing remarks.
So, well, I get some injection of optimism today. Well, of course, there is some optimism anyway inherent in this, because we would never have started this if we were not optimists. But I got a little bit of a LIGO moment today, maybe, because if I see what we started 1 year ago, okay, when we kicked off the projects, and we said, okay, there are things which need to come during the ramp-up phase, maybe at the end of the ramp-up phase. And among these, there were, you know, quantum communication infrastructure, which was announced as a possible hypothesis, and quantum computing infrastructure. And we said there must be more startups showing up. And we thought in our minds this was a 3-year time scale. So I should say that with all, of course, the depressing, self-flagellating comments about the Americans and the Chinese and so on, I mean, here I feel a strong acceleration, actually. And I mean, I said I got my LIGO moment because this relates to what Jürgen Mlinek said this morning when he said, you know, the last sentence, you know, squeeze light will be used for gravitational wave detection, and then it actually happened, and he was very surprised. So there are many things that we wrote, and yes, we did believe that they would happen, but did we believe that they would happen so fast here in Europe with all our 28 or maybe 27 member states? Well, I don't know that we were sure that this would take off so strongly. And I think that today we get some evidence that this is really taking off strongly. So there is a trend. We had these presidency events from time to time, and in the beginning they were a little bit, maybe sometimes a little bit bureaucratic. There was the big boom in Amsterdam with the Dutch presidency. This was, you know, very lot of enthusiasm. And then we had some other events in which sometimes maybe you had the feeling, okay, we have to do it, you know, it's a little bit maybe formal. And okay, then some high-level people come and they give a speech. But really, I mean, all the very high-level people we had today, I mean, I felt their heart pounding. And really, they have given a lot of thought into what they were saying. It was none of the high-level people who were here today gave something, you know, purely formal. So there is a lot of energy which I sense from all the directions. And one important point, which is maybe for me the main take-home message here, is, well, even 1 year ago when we started, we said it's Horizon Europe, it's the framework program, Horizon 2020 at the time. But now, I mean, it's moving from the research and innovation framework program towards the Digital Europe program. So this all infrastructure thing on which this discussion was centered is into Digital Europe. And it is not, perhaps, what some colleagues might have feared some time ago, like, oh, now the focus is going to shift away from research and it is just going to be industry. So what we kept hearing from all sides today was the focus is broadening. It's not shifting away, it's getting broader. And actually, this is not just some empty words because the financing is getting much broader. Yeah. So, and in this sense, I think this justifies some optimism. And then, of course, to conclude, I should say that I did disobey in the end the orders of our hierarchy, and I did look on my cell phone, and I have good news and bad news for you. And good news, as everybody else has of course checked, is there is a Brexit agreement. And bad news is there is a Brexit agreement. And why is it bad news? Not only President Juncker said he is sad because Brexit is leaving, I'm not being sentimental on this. For us it is very concrete bad news. Because Brexit, the UK departing, means a big question mark on the next multi-annual financial framework. And there is a little bit of an unlucky situation because, you know, now Brexit is happening at the very same time in which the next MFF and the next framework program is discussed. And the situation is such that Parliament proposed 120 billion, and they wrote a very big 1 billion for quantum research, and then on top of that, Digital Europe. But then, with Brexit, we hear from Council it go down by 30 billions, maybe by 40 billions. And I was in Parliament 2 weeks ago, and the rapporteurs for the framework program told me, if it stays until 90, we can still keep it. If it goes down, we have to reopen the package. And God knows, or maybe not even him, because it is a quantum process. So, you know, according to local unrealism, you don't know, you cannot speak, you know, about that. So nobody knows what is going to happen. So, I mean, huge optimism and an enormous danger on the horizon. Well, how will it be coming out? This is beyond our pay grade, as the Americans say typically in such a case. But we can certainly say that we are best positioned, as well positioned as ever in this context. And this is really thanks to the engagement really from all sides, which is wonderfully represented here, from academia to institutions to RTOs to ministries to everybody. It is the engagement of the whole community. We will need more of that in the next years, especially in the next months, because, you know, the fight is going to be really bloody. So this is maybe something on which we will need more reasons to be grateful to everybody and to our sponsors at the institutional level. And so I'm not sure whether this is a good note or a bad note, but actually this is somehow what we take home from all the situation, and what came from here is a very positive force, and this will enable us, so here is my final optimism, to really overcome these difficulties, as we have done also in the past. And of course, in terms of the gratitude for what has happened, of course, I have to thank all the speakers and everybody, but especially have to thank the wonderful program committee. Starting from our Finnish friends, Mikko Möttönen. So I am told that you, I mean, they write 2 consonants, but you have to pronounce 3 at least, otherwise this is not really sounding right. So there is also Mikko Merimaa, and there is also Minna Gynes. And they have been fighting, you know, like heroes in the titanic effort of trying to get anyone from the Finnish government to be here with us today. And despite of the result, which is under everybody's eyes, well, it was really a titanic effort, and we really have to be thankful to them for this and for everything else that they put in place. I would also like to thank a lot our program committee part from Outreach, so Alina Hirschman and Lydia Sammarti. They are sitting as usual in the back and taking care that everything runs smoothly in terms of communication, and of course also our coordination action members, Markus Wilkens and Claudius Klein from the program committee, and once again everybody who has been here. And now I have to say the only important things of this closing message, as I have been told by the organizers, that now you have to go out and there is a bus taking you to the reception. And beware, it is a point of no return, because the bus goes but does not return. And with this, have a nice reception, a nice trip to the conference, and I close hereby this wonderful afternoon.